Hello, everybody. Today I want to talk about what's got the whole music world lit, the beef between Kendrick and Drake. Now, up till this point, I didn't really think I had anything interesting to say about the beef, because I think beef in general is kind of childish. And you know what? If you just want to discredit anything I say based on that and want to tell me, like, oh, it's part of rap culture, okay, fine. I just think it's stupid. I think it most of the time ends up with these grown men calling each the majority of rap history, it's been grown men calling each other FAG and threatening violence, and in some cases, actual violence happens, all because two guys are fighting. And I know it's more complicated than that, but I don't think it's worth it most of the time. And it ends up being petty. The rap beefs that people really like, I'm thinking like Story of Adidon, ends up with some, I particularly always think of the bars directed at 40, making fun of his physical limitations, which is, I think, messed up. And that there's often in the crossfire for that case, a child's life is being brutally messed up. It's hard enough knowing what these children of celebrities have to deal with, just being children of celebrities that everyone knows. Then you have a song that names them and outs them, that's going to follow them the rest of their lives. I think that's messed up. I think a lot of people would probably think I'm soft for that. And you know what? That's totally fine. Not really what I want to talk about. If you like the rap beef and you think it's exciting, cool. Totally get it. But we've gotten into the territory in this beef that I find really interesting. Not because it is different than all of that, but mostly, what I'm mostly going to be talking about is Meet the Grams by Kendrick. Because it was really one of the most brutal and damning pieces of music I've ever listened to. It was as cutthroat and dark as I could expect something to be, and brutally honest. But what I find really interesting about it is that, from a certain perspective, you could see this song is not really being 100% about Drake. It could be, in a lot of ways, I think it's a criticism of hip hop. Because, when the first thing I thought of when I was listening to Meet the Grams was, wow, a lot of this could be said about a lot of hip hop stars, or a vast majority of hip hop songs. Specifically thinking about the kind of acceptance of the misogyny in hip hop, acceptance of abuse in a lot of cases too. I mean, it's an endless list of rappers who are abusers, and we just kind of like shrug it off and just keep listening to the music. But I'm not here to tell you to point a finger and be like, you are wrong. As a consumer, you are wrong. Because I don't see the point in that. I'm still listening to these artists. I don't think you're immoral for listening to Playboi Carti still. But I think what Kendrick is talking about on this track, and you know what, the other tracks were pretty cool. I liked Euphoria. It was a cool song. I had some problematic aspects. I thought there were some problematic aspects, but I'm not going to really go into that. And I thought the what's it called that came right after that was a banger. It was a great track. But particularly on Meet the Grams. First of all, I just want to say that I don't think this track is all good as far as its arguments. It kind of does this even more serious thing than what I was talking about earlier with Story of Adidon. Kendrick's literally addressing Drake's son and daughter. If it's a real person or not, we don't really know. And that's messed up. Imagine having like the therapy this kid's gonna need just to accept the fact that, well, look, if all the alleged things are true, then Drake, yeah, is not a good father to him anyway. But just I can't imagine going through life knowing that like there's a diss where someone you don't know is claiming to want to be your mentor and that your father is a horrible person. Like how easy it is for this kid to get bullied as is. But in rap beef, it doesn't really matter, which I just think is crazy. I feel bad for these kids. Um, and you know what? You can't just blame it all on Drake for what's going to happen to these kids because Kendrick's choosing to say their names in a song. Biggest song out right now. Um, and I don't know. I'm find myself thinking about the damage this is going to do to them rather than just going, oh wow, look how crazy these insults are. I don't know. I think that's part of why I find it childish. The other big issue I find with it is that Kendrick is listing all these ways on how Drake is a. I'm not gonna say it. I think it would get this video flagged or something. But if you listen to the song, you know what I'm talking about. And I think something I just kept thinking about was why was he holding on to this? Why doesn't the police know about all of this if this is true, right? Most people in hip hop, he lays it all out, most of it out. I mean, his last album was Mr. Morale, where he was pretty openly saying, "These are my flaws. I've done horrible things. I have mistreated my wife and cheated on her." So I think that's the crux of what Kendrick is saying to Drake is that you are a fake, you are a bad person, and you don't want to change. And what I find interesting about that, you could put Kanye on the other end of this. And you know what? A lot of these people on Kendrick's side could also be placed on the other side of this. You think Rick Ross? I mean, we know Rick Ross's history. Like he's not someone who is rapping about his problems and talking about all the bad things he does. Because honestly, I don't know. It's not really done in hip hop. Mr. Morale is a very unique album. So in a lot of ways, I look at this track as Kendrick looking at hip hop and being like almost angry with the fakeness from people like Drake, who want to say and act a certain way when they're not. But I think what interests me about Meet the Grams is he's taking it another level. It's so easy to call Drake like not really hip hop because everyone knows that he was not from the projects. He didn't grow up in that environment, even though he wants to act like he did. But alongside that, what Kendrick is saying is that you're not real. You're not a good person. As clean as day, he wants to say you're not a good person, and we should not just accept that. And you know what I find really interesting, you would not hear Rick Ross calling Drake all of these, listing out the abuses of Drake. And I don't think you'd hear Future saying it either, because they're not prepared for the scrutiny that's going to come if they call him out on that in a lot of ways. Because they know they don't have a clean record, and they have skeletons in their closet. And I'm not saying Kendrick doesn't, and I think in a lot of ways, he brought it to this level, knowing that everything he has done is something that he's willing to move on from and move forward with. He's not hiding his skeletons. That was the whole point of Mr. Morale, right? He went to therapy. That was what the album was about. Kendrick Goes to Therapy, but could have been the name of the album. And if you listen to Drake's music, he has been, I don't know if he's a narcissist. I don't know the guy. But his music definitely doesn't paint him as a very thoughtful person who accepts his mistakes. And I think if you listen to the last track that he just released, I think that definitely shows it. Where he's like, he's gaslighting. He's definitely gaslighting, talking about how I didn't do that and it was all fake. I fed you fake information. And also, even if I didn't feed you fake information, you're an abuser too. And like he's just scrambling for an argument. Um, never would, never. But to be honest, I don't think it's ever been a part of these beefs to look at all the things you've done wrong and be like, oh yeah, I maybe I should reflect on that, on all these issues. It wasn't like that with Pusha T. I've never known any of the beefs that I know to be like that. It's never about a self-reflection and being like, look, these are the things I've done. And what inspired me to make this video, I was actually watching a video talking about how it's interesting that Kendrick never says, like, he never defends himself for these things that Drake is saying, because it's not really about him. I don't think Kendrick's hatred of Drake has anything to do with, like, I don't think there's anything Drake could say to Kendrick that he would feel the need to rebuttal, because that's not really what it's about. Like, Kendrick hates what Drake represents in hip hop, like a narcissistic liar who is fed so much popularity and so much critical acclaim despite being an abusive, cruel person. So I think this is in part why I think there's something different with this beef. Like, the reason, like, Kendrick's raw hatred on Meet the Grams is something that I've never heard before and don't expect most people to talk about, because I think a lot of people are expecting kind of more poetics going into it. When people think about about beef, they're not thinking about people just saying, "I want you to die," like Kendrick is. It's as far as I know, I've never heard anything like that. It feels most, in my opinion, most beefs are about kind of superfluous stuff. But Kendrick is like, no, actually, you are an abuser. You deserve to be in jail. You don't deserve to have love and critical acclaim. Which is just, I think, really interesting, because he's calling out a certain sect, a certain established norm in hip hop, really. Think about all the artists that have been super popular that are abusers. I mean, I just mentioned Playboi Carti. Remember XXX? They were super popular. They are super popular, and no one really cares. And no one brings the, no one is calling out these guys. I think of, what's his name? 6ix9ine too. I'm not going to mention much about J. Cole, but I do think it's interesting that he bowed out, because he knows he also doesn't call out himself. I think that's why. And that he isn't honest with himself and his faults. No one else is making a Mr. Morale. If J. Cole made a Mr. Morale kind of album, I think it would be really interesting. Maybe he wouldn't be such a fake conscious hip hop artist in my eyes if he was willing to lay it all out. But I just remember J. Cole talking about, pray for Tekashi, they want him to rot. Like, yeah, I do want him to rot. In hip hop, we kind of like put to the side so many things that shouldn't be okay. And on this track, Kendrick's kind of going, you are all those things. You are all the evil in hip hop, and I hate you for it. Which is, there's nothing more you can say to that than, wow. He doesn't put it in fancy language. He just, I'm on Meet the Grams. He says, I want you to die. And it opens up, I think what's interesting about it opens up the whole can of worms. These guys who are like acting like they're on Kendrick's side. Something, I don't know, I don't want to get too into this, but what started this whole beef, at least right, the modern iteration of it, the 2024 iteration of it, was on the Metro Boomin song. And I've been hearing Metro put all this stuff on Twitter about, mostly talking about the homophobic, or the homosexual allegations, or the not really black allegations. And it's just like, no one wants to talk about what Kendrick actually is saying, No one wants to talk about the real demons Drake has. Everyone just wants to make fun of the stuff every hip-hop beef is made fun of. Oh, you're gay. Why is it always, you're gay? who cares? Is it really an insult to be like, oh, look at Drake's gay? For the children of hip hop, yeah, I guess so. For all these 12-year-olds who are attracted to this nonsense. Anyway, don't want to get into that. But there was a a fire, or there was a misfire, because today I saw Metro Boomin tweets came out about Metro Boomin when he was younger, just saying some horrible stuff in tweets, and that's kind of, I thought, was interesting. It's like Metro Boomin is not on, he's not on Kendrick's side in this, and there's a reason he doesn't go out and talk about like, hey, haha, Drake is a CM. He doesn't say that, even though, just like we're saying, it's like, why doesn't Drake care that, or in the track, the Hard Part 6, why doesn't he talk about those allegations? Because he knows no one in hip hop really cares. No one's looking at the morals of a rapper for some reason. Maybe we should have a higher standard. Maybe we shouldn't have a higher standard. For who we look up to in music. There's a big argument for that. Maybe we should stop moralizing artists and just be listening to the music. It's a good point. Or it's a good interesting perspective, I'd say. I've talked about that before when talking about Kanye. But just because you talk about the hypocrisies and the issues and the immoral things rappers have done, and other artists too, doesn't mean you approve of it or you disapprove of it if you keep listening, I think. But I don't know. I think part of the big reason I really was gravitated toward Meet the Grams is because it's something that he's saying something that no one else is going to be willing to say. He broke the barrier in a lot of ways to talk about these things that no one else was willing to do. Call Drake gay, make fun of like that he's fake, but no one's going to actually like call out these things. Now, is it because it's not true? I guess we'll have to see. It'll really age everything having to do with this beef if it's all a lie. But yeah, my thoughts overall is that I'm really intrigued by Kendrick's desire to bring all these things to light that maybe were swept under the rug. You know, another thing I wanted to mention was that Kendrick's hated Drake for a while. If you've been a fan of Kendrick, you know all the way back to Damn era, he's hated Drake. But these guys, Metro and Future, I mean, they like 2 or 3 years ago they were working together. So that's why it really falls on deaf ears to hear from them like talking about like jumping on the bandwagon, because you didn't care so much that he was fake or gay 2 or 3 years ago when you were making music with him. It, in many ways, up till Meet the Grams, was just a standard hip hop beef in my eyes, where we talk about these things, make fun of someone, and it devolves into childish insults pretty quickly, which is like, whatever. I don't really care for it that much. It feels like a soap opera or something. And then Kendrick crossed this line with Meet the Grams, where he's like, no, there's more to be said. You're not, you're a bad person. You are a horrible father. You are hiding a daughter. A misogynist. No one else is calling Drake a misogynist, because they're misogynists too. Like, let's just be honest. No one says no. No one's calling for a stopping of calling people calling women bitch in hip hop. It's just accepted. It's normal. It's what we're supposed to do. It's hip hop. I know I'm gonna get hate for this, but I don't think it's okay. I think it should be changed. So maybe that's why I feel a certain connection to this part of the beef, because in a lot of ways, Mr. Morale, one of my favorite albums, close to probably my second favorite Kendrick album, did something heard of in hip hop. And this is in a lot of ways the epilogue to that, where Kendrick's like, this is all I am, and all I'm ready to move forward from is back here. Hip hop, why do you still idolize these hateful and horrible people and not care? We're done talking about, oh, he's gay. He's a horrible person. That's more important. What do you have to say to that, Drake? And he says, I'm not hiding, daughter. What are you talking about? It's like, oh, yeah, nothing else to say than that. So I'm curious if this will be opening a can of worms for a lot of other things. Maybe there will be new expectations as for what we should be allowing in popular hip-hop. Like, maybe we shouldn't just be putting up with abusers and idolizing abusers. It probably won't change. But I do find it as an interesting part of Kendrick's artistic legacy to hear him talking about this and pointing to a significant person who he sees kind of as an antithesis to who he wants to be, as we see on Mr. Morale. Kendrick isn't perfect, and I have a lot of problems with what he said too. Even on Mr. Morale too, a lot of what he does is not perfect, and I have some issues with it. But it feels like Kendrick's one of the only people who is willing to try to call this stuff out and be like, nah, this isn't okay. You're gonna bring up my family. You're an abuser. I'm gonna call you out as it should be. This is not just beef anymore. You're a horrible person. Those are my thoughts on it so far. Find it intriguing. So, I can't say that I'm not trying to say I'm any better than all the people who find it interesting and love rap beef. You do you. I'm curious to see what Kendrick does from this point. If he releases great music like these last two tracks, I'm all for it. Anyway, thanks for listening. Hope you guys have a great day.